What is up, guys? We've got a new partner alert here at DNVR. We've partnered with a premier dispensary for you guys to get smoking hot deals. That's right. Solace Meds is our new partner. They have 4 convenient Colorado locations, one in Fort Collins, Wheat Ridge, one off Broadway, and one just blocks away from the DNVR bar on East Colfax. The coolest thing about these guys right now is they are giving away a trip to Jamaica in the month of April. No BS. Head into one of their 6 locations. They also have 2 in Oklahoma City. And sign up to win a trip to Jamaica. They'll give you all the details on how to enter, or you can visit solacemeds.com/sweepstake to find the rules. Or again, head into any location and ask one of their bud tenders how you can get in. Solace Meds makes your cannabis shopping experience a delight. You can head to their website, view their menu, order online, and pick it up at your convenience. Just head to solacemeds.com. That's SOLACE meds.com and purchase from there. The trip to Jamaica is a 7-night all-inclusive trip to paradise. And again, Solace Med is located just blocks away from the DNVR bar on East Colfax. There's also one off Broadway, Wheat Ridge, and Fort Collins. When you make the purchase, be sure to use code DNVR20 for 20% off your entire purchase and get in on that trip to Jamaica where there's no purchase necessary, open to legal residents of Colorado, 21 or over, or if you're from Oklahoma, you just have to be 18, and 4/30/21. And again, the official rules at solacemeds.com/sweepstakes, void where prohibited.
Number one for the one and only DNVR. 2 goes out to Zach Mace, Arcade at the bar. 3 for Mr. B in that old trophy case. Not the post still waiting for, well, bring on the chase. Out on the field at Mile High, Broncos win is our desire. Coupled with Breck, Brew and a friend, bleed orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us, DNVR. We are DNVR.
Welcome in to the DNVR Broncos podcast presented by MSU Denver Online. Check out all they have to offer at msudenver.edu/online. MSU Denver students work twice as many hours as students attending any other Colorado institution. So if you're looking to get your degree while keeping that full-time job, there's no better place to do it than at MSU Denver. And then maybe you get that degree, you get a better full-time job. It's all, a nice little cycle that you can get rolling over at MSU Denver. So check them out. 45 plus online and hybrid programs, 750 total classes. Everything you need is over at msudenver.edu/online.
My boys, what's shaking? So pumped to be starting this week with you guys. And man, do we have a fun show today. And really, draft starts next week and the buzz is really going now.
Yeah, it is. That was actually going to be the first question I was going to ask you guys is, where are we in draft season in terms of how much you read into what you're hearing? Because if you feel like if we've turned the corner to where you can actually start believing what you hear, well, then you're definitely going to be in the camp that the Broncos are looking at a quarterback. Mace, where do you think we are in the cycle?
I think we're very close to the Broncos having their board set and then saying, all right, are we comfortable with multiple quarterbacks? And if that's the case, we know that at least one of them will be there for do we move up? Now, of course, we're going to get into what Woody Page posted on Saturday on the Denver Gazette. And after that, I retweeted Denver Gazette, kind of did some bullet points because, of course, it was behind a paywall. And then not long after, it was made very clear to me with a source with knowledge that even though the Broncos are in the mix to move up, that they have not placed the call as Woody Page asserted that, but it was, like I said, made very clear to me that moving up is a definite possibility. And I think kind of putting 2 and 2 together, reading tea leaves a little bit, I think they're waiting for that final piece of the puzzle, which is Pat Shurmur today up at the Fargo Dome in North Dakota, watching Trey Lance with his own eyes.
Yeah.
And so let's take a quick step back with that Woody Page article. He said the Broncos have made the call to Atlanta about trading up to number 4, and that right there is obviously huge. Then, of course, today you have Albert Breer coming out saying the Broncos are the sneaky team that has been, big time in the quarterback market. We'll see if it manifests, I believe is what Albert said exactly. And now you have Pat Shurmur in Fargo checking out Trey Lance today.
Yeah, and Breer, just to clarify, said other teams view the Broncos as the sneaky team looking for a quarterback, which is, I think, a little bit more notable than just him saying it. A lot of people on Twitter responding to me posting that, saying, what is sneaky about the Broncos being interested in a quarterback? They tried to trade for Matt Stafford. They've been at all the pro days, and I actually tend to agree with that sentiment. The Broncos haven't been all that sneaky about their interest in upgrading at the quarterback position, whether that's the starter or the backup. Although they haven't done much work on the backup where they could have, and as the news is just breaking here, Alex Smith retiring from the NFL, so there's another one off the list of the veteran hedge, backup group. But Mace, you said this, and I think it really is this big of a day for the Broncos. Pat Shurmur was in at Justin Fields' last pro day, really dialing in the Broncos' entire board of people who matter, getting a view at Justin Fields. Right after that, it felt like the QB steam started to pick up. So, if you're reading the tea leaves there, you say, okay, he approved of Justin Fields. He liked Justin Fields.
Yeah.
And now you kind of have the last piece of the puzzle here as Pat Shurmur goes to see Trey Lance. And I think it may really be as simple as if Pat Shurmur comes back and says, I love that guy too, then the Broncos could be starting to get to work on trying to make that move.
Yeah, that's kind of the impression that I've gotten. I really think with Woody, I don't want to kind of critique what he got, but it's possible that maybe just it was a little bit of a kind of a wire cross technicality kind of thing. Whether did the Broncos call? Did they not call? But there's definitely interest there. There's definitely, you're watching from Doug Valley, you can kind of see the smoke signals off in the distance a little bit. You're just waiting for whether it's going to be the white puff of smoke or the dark puffs of smoke. But with Shurmur going, I feel like kind of what I've gathered here is that it's Lance and Fields, that they like them both, but this is sort of the kind of the final, like I said, the final piece. This is seeing the guy in person, seeing what his body language is, seeing how responsive he is to coaching, just seeing kind of what his demeanor is, of course, because one of the things of these second pro days that we're seeing with Justin Fields and Trey Lance is you've got teams that are saying, okay, hey, can you roll right? Can you roll left? Doing some specific things that maybe weren't on the initial pro day, and then also just kind of getting a feel for a little bit of what the guy is like. I mean, they've talked with these guys over Zoom. They've watched all the film. I really think this is probably just kind of sliding that final piece into the puzzle, and I would be shocked if Pat Shurmur came out with anything but, yeah, I liked this guy. I still like this guy. And if we like both Fields and Lance, let's go ahead and get up to 4 if we can get a deal done, because then we know we'll be happy with either.
To me, guys, the Broncos are at the point where, what are we doing? Are you really waiting on Pat Shurmur to sign off on this? Because if Pat Shurmur is the guy that pauses this, well, then what's George Paton doing? George Paton is the general manager, and we're talking about the offensive court. Now, I get just waiting for a sign-off, but Pat Shurmur should not change George Paton's plans when it comes to the quarterback. Pat Shurmur is, essentially on a 1-year deal right now, seeing if he can succeed this year with Vic Fangio, just like Vic Fangio is kind of on a 1-year deal under under George Paton right now. If George Paton signs off on Trey Lance and Justin Fields, then you got to make the call. And clearly the Broncos have been in the quarterback conversation, which means that they don't really believe in Drew Lock. Because if you believed in Drew Lock, you're not looking to trade a first-round pick for Matthew Stafford. You're not in all of these quarterback conversations that we're talking about, and you're not thinking about drafting a quarterback in the first round. So now that you're at this point, and another guy of Alex Smith is off the board, now you have to do something with draft capital to get a quarterback, whether you're drafting a quarterback in the first round or whether you're trading capital for a Teddy Bridgewater or Gardner Minshew. Draft capital is going to be involved in getting your next quarterback. So if you're at this point, what are you doing? The Broncos have already made up their mind. And to me, it seems very clear that Pat Shurmur wants a huge upgrade at quarterback. He doesn't want competition. He wants a replacement with a first-round quarterback. So Pat Shurmur, it really, whatever he says, guys, it really shouldn't change the way that George Paton's feeling right now.
Well, do you think that Pat Shurmur should have changed the way George Paton approached the running back position?
No, I don't think he should have. But I mean, clearly, you're right. But we're also talking about a guy that it wasn't just Pat Shurmur hasn't believed in. John Elway didn't believe in Philip Lindsay last year. There's a lot of people in that organization that weren't willing to commit big time to Philip Lindsay. And so we're talking about a second, third string running back and the way they viewed him, guys, as opposed to your starting quarterback. Very different right there.
Yeah, I just think it's a symbol that, George Paton is kind of using a top-down approach to the decisions that they're making. He wants all opinions. Now, I'm with you in the sense that if George Paton absolutely adores Trey Lance and Pat Shurmur comes back and he's like, not my kind of guy. Well, now you're in a weird position, but it should not make the decision for you because, drafting a quarterback in the top 10, in this case, number 4 overall, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Mace, would be the highest the Denver Broncos have ever drafted a quarterback in their history. That is a 10 to 15 year move. Whereas Pat Shurmur could really be the offensive coordinator for one more year. So
right.
Coaches are hired to be fired, guys.
Yeah, and I get what you guys are saying, but at the same time, you also don't want to sabotage this year, and you don't want to have things get too screwed up, guys. I'm saying that, but I would really be surprised if Pat Shurmur doesn't come out of seeing Trey Lance in person saying, "Yeah, I can coach that guy." And I think that's kind of the key thing here, because for one thing, we know about Trey Lance. He's got an outstanding football mind. One thing that we've seen just in how quickly he developed and got on radars, working under Randy Hedberg, who's one of the best QB tutors you're going to find anywhere, is that he is very coachable. So I'd be surprised if there's anything other than, yeah, I can, if we bring in this guy, I can work with him. And then it's a matter of deciding, okay, what is the price tag you're willing to pay? Because going up to 4 does, even though we've probably all done the Pro Football Network, Pro Football Focus mock draft simulators, and we've done the trades, but the reality is going up to 4, even though the Broncos don't want to do it, it probably means sacrificing your first round pick in 2022.
It has to, especially because if many teams or other teams around the league view the Broncos as a sneaky quarterback hungry team, like Albert Breer said, then the Falcons aren't going to say, you know what, we're willing to work out a little discount for the Broncos because we no, they're not going to give any discounts. They're going to say the Broncos are desperate right now. And you know what? They love the news. The Falcons love the news that Alex Smith just retired because the options for the Broncos are getting smaller and smaller, and they're zeroing in on that number 4 pick right now. So the Falcons are absolutely going to demand a first round pick. I saw something that the Denver Broncos, their staff put together what they think they're going to do. And there was a trade package that was suggested where the Broncos went from 9 to 4 and gave up like a second and a third. I think that's crazy. I think we're talking at least a first. We may be talking a first, next year's first and next year's second in order to do that. So you're going to have to be willing to give up a lot. But guys, that's not that much in the grand scheme of things. If we're talking just 2 first-round picks in order to move up to get a guy that you love. And if you love Justin Fields and Trey Lance, what are you waiting for? Secure that number 4 pick right now.
I completely agree. The question is like, how much do you love each guy? Because Mace only has one kid, but as much as parents tell you they love all their children equally, not possible.
No.
You have to love one more than the other. There's no way you
the
look.
way you say
Oh.
that, Ryan, I assume that you are your parents' favorite.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm picturing this scene in The Crown where Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip are basically, she's denying that she has a favorite child. And he's like, no, everyone knows who your favorite child is.
Exactly. So the Broncos have a favorite child here. You can't look and just say we love them both the exact same. It's just there's just no way. So the question really is how much do you love the second one, and is that enough to give up as much future capital as you're going to have to give? And again, are you waiting till draft day to do this, or are you truly saying, we scale this out of 100? We've got Justin Fields as a 96 and Trey Lance as a 94, or whatever it is. We want them bad, regardless of who it is. And if that's the case, then if Pat Shurmur comes back today and says, I love them both, they're both, very high on my scale, I like them both more than Drew Lock, well, then you should try to trade up to 4 by the end of the day or whatever. There's no reason to hesitate.
And isn't it very clear how the Broncos view these two guys, depending on when they make this trade, if they make this trade? If they love them both, then they do the trade today. If they only love one, then you do wait till Atlanta's on the clock, or you really, really, really try to get some intel. Maybe maybe you trade who's like a backup to San Francisco in order to get the intel on what's going to happen at 3. And that is an advantage that the Broncos have, is their very good relationship with the San Francisco 49ers. And look, we see John Elway's in some of those draft meetings, maybe all of them. So he's still dialed in. Well, he's just as dialed in to the San Francisco 49ers as anyone else outside of their building. So that's a great way to get intel. And OPMG comes in the comment section and is joking a bit, but there's some serious to it. He says, trade Drew to Atlanta to move up and get Fields. There, I fixed it. Well, obviously you're not going to do the 9 and Drew to move up there, but couldn't Drew be a nice piece? I mean, if the Falcons want a young quarterback, and if they're okay with it not being a Trey Lance or someone this year, isn't Drew actually make a lot of sense in that? Because if you're drafting a quarterback for the Broncos, Drew's not in your future. It's okay to move on. Probably best for both sides, including Drew, to move on. And then Atlanta gets their young quarterback, a guy that they can develop. So instead of maybe a first and a second, maybe you're doing a first, a fifth, and Drew. That makes it that much easier to digest if you're the Broncos, especially George Paton.
If they like him. But the problem is the Falcons may be like, well, if you're going to give us a second-round pick, we like Kellen Mond more.
Right.
And that's the thing that comes into play. We don't. It may well be that if they draft a quarterback, that if the Broncos decide, okay, Drew Lock is not the guy to partner with him, that it ends up being a separate deal. And frankly, the other thing that I think comes into play here is if we're talking about Justin Fields or Trey Lance, the needs might be different. Whereas, Justin Fields, I think we can all agree, is probably more ready to go early. And so maybe you don't necessarily need that guy who's sort of a quasi coach there, who's who's kind of leading the way. It's one of the reasons why if Trey Lance is the guy, Alex Smith would have made a lot of sense, but of course now he's retired. So if Trey Lance is the guy you're bringing, you probably need to add a veteran, because I'm not sure Drew Lock is the guy that's going to kind of point the way, because Drew's still learning as well. Justin Fields, on the other hand, more ready to go. Probably you can ride with Drew Lock and have I think would be a really fun competition between Drew Lock and Justin Fields. It maybe resembles the old Drew Brees, Philip Rivers dynamic back in San Diego.
So, Mace, you think it would be a competition between those two? I think they may put it as a competition in order just to not give the job to a rookie, but I don't think at the end of the day it would be much of a competition. I
wouldn't at all be surprised if Drew Lock starts week 1. I will agree with Woody Page on that. That if they're there, that if Drew is the starter right immediately, but the leash would be short, and that's where you find out, okay, is pressure going to make a diamond here? And if pressure does make a diamond in Drew Lock, then hey, so much the better. You got 2 young quarterbacks you're excited about, and you eventually trade the surplus.
Couple questions I have for you guys. One, shouldn't we also be talking about Mac Jones? Because if it's a Lance or Fields situation, that means we're talking about, okay, if the Niners take Fields, well, in that case, then it comes down to a Lance or Mac Jones situation. Zach, I know you're super high on Mac. Shouldn't he also be in this conversation?
Absolutely. He absolutely should be, guys. And right now, he may be my number 2 quarterback on the board, all kidding aside. And this is a guy that if you want an immediate upgrade right now, boom, you got one. If you want a guy that can do anything the coaches ask from a mental standpoint, boom, there you go. We just heard, as much as I love him, we've just heard zero buzz with the Broncos surrounding Mac Jones. So it's just hard to think that they've been keeping this so quiet when we know that there's a lot of buzz on Justin Fields. Now there's some buzz on Trey Lance. It's just, there's been zero buzz. So as much as I want to talk about Mac, there's just nothing that would lead us to believe that the Broncos have any of that.
Yeah, and there's not the same in-person commitment to seeing them in person and making sure all eyes have been on Mac Jones the way we saw all eyes on Justin Fields and now all eyes on Trey Lance. I mean, that's why it would be a surprise now. The thing that you have is you have a former Alabama quarterback and coach in your building in Mike Shula, who probably is able to get all the information and probably that you need on Mac Jones. But at the same time, the fact that you haven't had the same level of commitment to seeing in person probably says a lot about what the Broncos are thinking.
Okay, last thing here is I want your guys' take on it. I know that I think, well, okay, instead of assuming, I'll just ask you, would you guys trade up for either Lance or Fields?
Yes.
Like, are you cool with just saying whatever one falls to us we want?
In a heartbeat, yep.
Okay, now, which one's your favorite?
Fields. It's just because Fields is more ready to go right now. And with Trey Lance, I feel like the incubation, if you're going to do it right, is a year, maybe 2 years. I kind of, when I see Trey Lance and I think, okay, what's the best thing for him going from FCS to the NFL? I think back to Steve McNair in the mid-1990s when he got in for a couple of games late in his rookie season, 3 games late in his second year, and then was ready to go as the starter in year 3. You might be looking at that sort of development. Maybe you kind of trim that second year off and you're saying, okay, he's ready to go in 2022. But with a team that has a lot of things in place to have a good season and maybe get back to the playoffs right now, I think Fields might be able to help you out in that regard sooner. And the thing is, does possess a lot of the same upside that Trey Lance does. And I also think there's less bust potential with Justin Fields and Trey Lance because he has more experience as a starter. I really like them both. I'd be really happy with both, but for me, it's Fields over Lance.
Well, Mace, you're 100% right that Justin Fields will be better for this team right now, but it's pretty short-sighted especially if you're going to trade up for a quarterback, to go with the guy that gives you the best chance to win this year. And what are we talking about with the Broncos? We're talking about a team that if they get average quarterback play, which you can absolutely get from a rookie in 2021, if you get that, you can make the playoffs. I don't think any of us are talking about a Super Bowl contender this year. So I look at the guy that I think can be the best option for the Broncos for 10, 15, 20 years with the way that the NFL quarterbacks are playing right now. And I'm going Trey Lance. And I love both of them, but there's one thing that absolutely scares me so much with Justin Fields, and that's what everyone says, and you can see it when you watch, is potential slow processing. That's the biggest knock on Justin Fields. That is so scary when a guy has that concern with him in college. And what does everyone talk about? The jump from college to the NFL. It's so much faster. He's a slow processor in college. That's what really scares me. And with Trey, guys, I say it all the time. He has the Patrick Mahomes tools. He has everything that you want, including the mind. And guys, that's why I love Mac Jones, is because he has the mind. Well, from everything we've heard, Trey Lance has the mind as well. So you get Trey Lance with the mind plus all of the physical attributes that I absolutely love him. But Mace is right that right now for the Broncos, Justin Fields is a better fit, not just for the offense, but organizationally. But I'm not going to let the awkward 1 or 2 year fit, change who I'm picking for a 15-year move right now. Now, it would be awkward for what do you do? Does Drew Lock start? Is that really the mentor? Now you can't get Alex Smith. You're probably trading for Teddy Bridgewater. It is a weird situation at first, but I'm not going to let that change my perspective on a big time move.
Yeah. I said this the other day. I go back and forth on this a lot. I said it on Broncos Country tonight, and shout out to Mile High Report who did a whole write up on that. But I think as we move closer to the draft, I think I'm really sliding on the Lance scale towards Trey Lance. He is so intriguing to me, and I think what can be potentially his biggest knock ends up being one of my favorite things about him. To me, almost is a little bit of like a positive tiebreaker, which is just how much is untapped. He's really fresh in this whole thing, and there's a chance that when he gets sped up and when he has to do all these things, he comes back a little bit. There's also a chance that when he gets world-class coaching, all those tools that you mentioned, Zach, just blossom into something, that people just can't quite see just yet. And then the last thing for me is, while Justin Fields is also an incredible athlete, Trey Lance uses his athleticism to his advantage a lot more. And while I am very worried about the patience or lack thereof that exists in Broncos country with quarterbacks and how Trey Lance is going to take a little while to develop, I think that it will help buy him some time when he doesn't see his third read, he takes off and, gets 30 yards and jukes someone and stiff arms someone as he's going out of bounds. Like, he has that going for him. And I think you go back and you watch Josh Allen, who, he's playing at Wyoming, which is definitely a step above North Dakota State, although I think North Dakota State could probably beat them. But in terms of the teams that they play, it's a step up in terms of level of competition. But he got there, and he had a lot to learn. And as he was figuring out, he used his, extreme athleticism to survive and to keep fans, away from his throat for a little while. So I think that Trey Lance can do that. The last thing I'll say, there's a lot of George Payton connections with Trey Lance that just might, move him up a little bit in his head. This is a kid who's from Minnesota, which is where George Payton's been for the last however many years. Obviously playing right there in North Dakota, which is in the backyard. He also has, we talked a little bit about the Trevor Lawrence. I don't know what you want to call it. It actually ended up getting overblown after I said it was underblown. But, he talked about how he doesn't have a chip on his shoulder. And whether you think, that's a terrible thing for Trevor Lawrence or not, Trey Lance absolutely has a chip on his shoulder. This is a kid who dreamed of playing quarterback at Minnesota, and they told him, we'd rather have you at wide receiver or whatever it was. And so he went to North Dakota to prove it, and he absolutely did. He proved that he can do it. So he's going to come in and have a different level of attack to it than maybe even Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and I think another thing also, I don't want to denigrate Trevor Lawrence's work ethic, because I do think that way too much was made of that story. But Trey is noted for his study habits, and it's also one thing that we've learned about Justin Fields as well. As both. It's funny with Fields, the illumination happened when there was some critique of that, and everything that I've gathered is that it's anything but the case with Justin Fields. Both these guys are diligent. Both these guys are smart. Both of these guys also, we talk about their running, but they want to win from the pocket. And that's another thing. Like that's why when the Cam Newton comp came up for Justin Fields, like the smaller Cam Newton, I'm like, Cam wanted to win with his legs as much as from the pocket, but Justin wants to win from the pocket. And Trey Lance wants to win from the pocket. And in that regard, these guys are more like Russell Wilson than, say, Cam Newton or Steve Young, to go way back. I mean, Steve was just running all over the place back in the day. These guys want to beat you with their arm first, and then the legs are the second option.
And that's the modern day NFL quarterback, guys, is that the guys that have the ability to run, but it's not a true run first type of quarterback. And that's why some people are skeptical of Mac Jones, is because he doesn't have that ability. And that's why he could go 3, but if he doesn't go 3, how far does he fall? I still think he's going to be a top 15 pick. But I wouldn't be surprised, or I would be surprised if teams other than San Francisco are trading up into the top 5 in order to get Mac Jones, because he doesn't have that skill set that's so enticing for teams right now. And even though I like Trey more than Justin, I'm still going up and getting Justin Fields. And I would not be shocked one bit if the San Francisco 49ers get Trey Lance, and the 49ers are a perfect place for him. Where the Broncos don't make a lot of sense organizationally right now for Trey Lance, the 49ers make so much sense, because if Trey Lance comes in, balls out, easy. He's a starter. Jimmy Garoppolo's a backup. You can trade him at Garoppolo if you want. If he needs time, like a year or two, perfect. You have Jimmy Garoppolo right there. It's a perfect situation for them. And that's why when the trade was immediately made, I thought it was for Trey Lance. And Ryan, I'm gonna do what you do and stick by those of your immediate feel after. And it makes so much sense for them. So then you have to love Justin Fields as well. I do as well. So move up to 4.
Yeah, a lot of people in the comments talking about Drew Lock. Drew's just not the conversation today. But I mean, I've made my feelings on Drew, clear on this. If the Broncos decide to roll forward with him, I will believe that Drew Lock has what it takes to make that jump. It just, if we're being completely honest here, it just doesn't feel like the Broncos are going to do that. It doesn't feel like they believe in him to do that. And so that's why the conversation is where it is today.
Well, I mean, we have actions, not words. And I mean, even though they didn't make a deal for Matthew Stafford, I mean, you can't overlook the fact that within the first fortnight of George Paton being on the job, he was inquiring about and making an offer about Matthew Stafford. And then they kicked the tires on Sam Darnold on an offer. And they've been to these pro days. I mean, that doesn't look to me like a team that is happy with the state of its quarterback room.
No, you're exactly right. And so the question is just going to be whether the Broncos can get their guy, because I think if we're talking about one of these guys falling to 9, I think it's easy, right? And now so the question is, are the Broncos going to roll the dice with that? But I think that they want a big time upgrade. It's just whether or not it works out, especially with George Paton being a little gun shy and getting rid of draft picks in order to get a guy right now. And I think a great question comes in from background. He says, are you willing to move 3 ones to move up to 4?
No.
And you shouldn't have to, because it was 3 ones, including the one this year, to move up from 12 to 3. Well, you're moving, instead of moving up 9 slots, you're moving up 5 slots. And so if that's what the Falcons are demanding, you're saying, okay, that's too rich for the blood, and we're probably having to just kind of wait and see how the draft falls, and maybe Cincinnati is open to dealing at 5, although it sounds like by all accounts they are really high on Jamar Chase and want to stand pat at number 5 and take Jamar Chase, in which then case the conversation will move to Miami, and with Miami it may well depend on what the Falcons do and whether Kyle Pitts is off the board or not. So yeah. 3 ones is just it's too much, and it's unreasonable, because you should basically look at the 49ers deal to move up from 12 to 3 and cut it approximately in half, and that's a fair offer.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the way I look at it. Not to mention, you have to acknowledge that you're trading up for the 4th quarterback. Well, I think Trey Lance might be as high as 2 for me. It is still the 4th quarterback. That has to make the quarterback premium that we always talk about when you're trading up go down a little bit. If you were trading up to number 2 for the 2nd quarterback on the board, well, then you really have to pay. But I think that, you shouldn't have to give up 3 ones, and you shouldn't give up 3 ones.
And background says, but the Patriots may give up 3 ones, and that's because they would be going from 15 to 4. So, I mean, the Falcons would have to be okay with going back so much more in order to get a bigger return. So it's not the exact same. What I could see happening, and what would be a huge haul for the Falcons, is this year's first, next year's first, this year's second and next year's second. And that would be a huge haul for the Falcons to get to just move back 5 spots. Guys, if that's it, so we're talking about 2 firsts, 2 seconds. Are you doing it?
If you love the guy, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I agree. I mean, really, the big thing is the first. And how many ones are you talking about? If you're talking about 2, including this year, really anything else that you're throwing in, to me, is just that. It's okay, that's going to do it for you? 2 seconds? Okay, make the deal happen.
Yeah, again, and it comes back to, do you love the prospect? If you love the prospect, and you could maybe even make the case, if you love him enough and they say it's 3 ones or nothing, well, then maybe you just make the deal. You should be focused. I know George Payton wants to hold on to his draft capital. He wants to draft, he wants to build this thing through the draft. You should be focused on having worse draft picks, not holding on to your draft picks. And if you have to make a move to make your draft picks worse, and give up some of those draft picks, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you look at trading next year's pick, and maybe you don't want to trade the first or second round pick for next year, but also you say, well, look at this team, look at the roster that is together, and of course we see on the video the Broncos pumped out, like John Elway, at least for one meeting, has been in that room. So you have if this team is close, you have an idea of what it might be able to do. It's close. It has a softer schedule. It's fair to expect 9 to 11 wins and being right there, talking about being in the playoffs. And thus that means you are picking 19, 20, 21, 22. And then that deal becomes palatable. And the other thing, everyone drink, because I'm about to talk about a cost control quarterback. Because if you do have the cost control quarterback, then that means you have a lot of money that you can save next year going to the offseason. And then your draft effectively becomes re-signing Cortland, getting Bradley Chubb his long-term deal, re-signing an Alexander Johnson, maybe even bring back Kareem Jackson for another season, maybe bring back Kyle Fuller on a 3-year deal. That becomes your draft, and you can afford to do that if you are going into year 2 of 5 years of cost control with a guy that you drafted this year, quarterback.
That's such a great point, and something that George Payton could very easily fall in love with as he's watching the tape of all those guys that you mentioned.
Oh my gosh.
And you'll still have John Elway on your staff in 1 year for next free agency. You tap into that and let him do some work as well.
Okay, last question I want to ask you guys on this. There's a chance, and a legitimate chance in my mind, that Atlanta says, we love Kyle Pitts so much, we don't care. We need to make sure we get Kyle Pitts. The same thing could go for Cincinnati, where they're saying, look, we know that these trade back offers are great, but we just don't love anyone at 9 the way that we love Jamar Chase. We're afraid he's not going to be there. Or heck, maybe it's Penei Sewell, whoever it is. So at what point do you get to a place where you're saying, okay, now there's a spot there? Is it Detroit at 7 where you're saying, okay, we just have to get in front of Carolina? Because that might be my new favorite best case scenario is Atlanta says, we're not giving up Kyle Pitts. Cincinnati says, we're not giving up Jamar Chase. Miami says, we're not giving up Devontae Smith. And now you just have to move up 2 spots.
Oh, well, and that's huge. And you're trading a second-round pick if you do that. And also, that number 7 is kind of where the Patriots start to come in, because I don't necessarily see the Falcons wanting to go from 4 to 15, and or the Patriots willing to give up 3 first-round picks in order to do that. So I think when you get to 7 is when other teams in the back half of the draft start making sense in order to move up. So you're not just competing with Carolina, you're competing with those teams. But heck, if you're the Detroit Lions and you only have to move back 2 spots and you can get a second, maybe even squeeze a second and a third out of the Broncos to move back 2 spots and still get your guy, then I think that's just a sweet spot for both teams to be in right there. And then it's the best case scenario, because sure, the Broncos have to give up a second, maybe 2 day 2 picks there. That doesn't matter. Is you're keeping your first round picks in order to get it? Absolutely, you do that. And then you may still have your pick of either of those quarterbacks if Mac Jones is the one to go at 3.
Yeah, and that I would actually also say this, even though I know we kind of wrote off Miami there. One thing that we have seen with Miami with this administration in the last few years is they have been more than willing to make trade after trade after trade, go up, go back down. That is a spot where I think if the Falcons and Bengals say, we love Pitts, we love Chase. I think the trade happens at 6 with Miami. And that's probably where maybe with Miami, you're talking about a second, and maybe like a day 3, but maybe like a 2nd and a 4 to move up to number 6. You get to Detroit, you might be talking about 2 3s. You might not even be talking about a 2nd round pick, perhaps. Yeah. It's really palatable.
This could get really stressful for the Broncos. I mean, especially if there's 2 guys there. You're trying to figure out, okay, who's trying to jump us? Who's their guy? Who's our guy? That would be because there's a chance that, hey, maybe Carolina loves Justin Fields. So they jump all the way up to 6 to get Justin Fields. So now you're looking, okay, now it's just Detroit and Miami in front of us. So like we can just let it fall. Now we can let it fall to us.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't roll the dice. Don't do it. Still make the trade.
What could happen?
Yeah. Yep. The other thing also, if you deal with Atlanta, you are dealing with a team that has a significant cap crunch right now and looking to save dollars wherever they can find. Going from 4 to 9 for Atlanta would save some coin for them. And because they are in dire cap straits right now. Of course, the Matt Ryan contract is going to continue to be an issue into 2022. So any relief that you can give them for a team that, I mean, I think they've got 52 guys on their roster right now because they've been unable to do anything in free agency because of where they stand cap wise. So they need dudes. They need picks. And it wouldn't at all surprise me, guys, if you deal with Atlanta and they go from 4 to 9 and then they go down again from 9 because they've got spots to fill that they haven't been able to take care of in free agency because of their cap situation. And so that's one reason why, even though they may love Kyle Pitts, there may be some fire to the smoke about them moving down because it could be a roster necessity.
That would be such a terrible move for them to do that for cap purposes. Wow.
They still extract a lot. They can go ahead and they can get an awful lot because, like we've mentioned, the Patriots are going to be in the chat at some point, perhaps looking for a quarterback. And also, don't rule out Washington. Don't rule out Chicago either as teams that can get into that mix. But the Broncos, with that number 9 pick, have the single best asset of any of those teams in a move up.
Right, because, of course, they're not going to do it with Carolina.
Oh yeah, I think we're pretty safe in saying they're not going to do anything to give a division rival a quarterback of the future, and unless Terry Fontenot has gotten really dumb in the last few months, and I don't think he has. He's a smart guy. He's not going to make that kind of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I agree with DD in the comments here who says, as it stands now, this is going to be a fun draft. And today I woke up as excited for this draft as I have been yet. It's really starting to the hype is starting to build for me, which is great. If you enjoyed the pod, hit us with a like, subscribe. You can sign up for alerts. There's all different ways to join here. And of course, we appreciate you guys for tuning into this. And if you want to hear the rest of the podcast, find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. We've got plenty more content coming over there. And if you want your comments read, you can, of course, always leave them on the podcast if you're a DNVR member. So for now, that wraps it up for the live portion. We'll talk to you guys later.